He was a good man. He was honest, played by the rules, and believed in the fundamental fairness of the world. His legacy? A footnote in the history written by the man who broke every rule to destroy him. Why does the idealist always pave his own road to ruin? Because in the unforgiving theater of power, goodness is not a shield, it is a target. This is the beautiful lie they teach you, the grand illusion sold to the masses to ensure their compliance. It is the myth of the level playing field. A world where merit is always rewarded, where integrity is its own defense, and where justice prevails simply because it is right. You are told to be transparent, to act with unwavering honor, to trust in the better nature of your fellow man. You are encouraged to build your house on the foundations of sincerity and fair play, believing it will stand firm against any storm. This is the moral landscape of the common man. It is a well-lit stage, governed by a clear set of rules, where every actor is expected to know their lines and perform their part with virtue. But this stage is a deception. The true game is not played under the lights, but in the shadows that surround it. The idealist, the well-intentioned man, spends his life perfecting his performance on this stage, utterly blind to the fact that the real levers of power are being pulled from behind the curtain. His virtues, which he has been taught are his greatest strengths, become his most profound vulnerabilities. His transparency allows his rivals to read his every move, to anticipate his strategy before he has even committed to it. They see his intentions laid bare, and use this knowledge not to cooperate but to lay traps. His unwavering honor binds him to a code of conduct that his enemies feel no obligation to follow. While he refuses to strike a dishonorable blow, they feel no such compunction. He offers them a hand in good faith. They see an arm to be broken. His predictability, born from a steadfast adherence to moral principles, makes him an open book to a predator. They know he will not lie. They know he will not betray a promise. They know he will hesitate before making a cruel but necessary decision. And so they can maneuver around him with absolute certainty, using his own moral compass as a map to his downfall. He becomes a casualty of his own noble character, a pawn in a game he never even knew he was playing. He sought an advantage through righteousness, failing to understand that in the calculus of power, righteousness is a currency with no value. The world does not reward you for the purity of your intentions. It rewards you for the effectiveness of your results. He who lives by the rules designed to govern the flock will inevitably be devoured by the wolves who operate beyond them. This is where the path of the prince begins. It starts with a brutal, liberating acceptance of reality. It begins with the wisdom of Niccolò Machiavelli, the Florentine diplomat, who looked into the abyss of human nature and did not blink. He saw the world not as a classroom for saints, but as an arena for ambitious and fallible men. His philosophy is not a celebration of evil. It is a clinical diagnosis of power. It is a manual for those who wish to build something that lasts in a world that is inherently unstable. The first and most critical lesson he teaches is the rejection of illusion. As he wrote, "For there is such a difference between how one lives and how one ought to live, that he who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner learns his own ruin than his preservation." This single sentence is the key that unlocks the unfair advantage. The master strategist does not waste time lamenting that men are not angels. He accepts their nature, that they are, in Machiavelli's words, ungrateful, fickle, liars and deceivers, avoiders of danger, greedy for profit. He does not see this as a tragedy, but as a simple, immutable fact of the political environment, as elemental as gravity. To ignore it is to build a tower that will surely fall. Therefore, the foundation of all Machiavellian strategy is to operate based on this raw, unvarnished truth of the human condition. The unfair advantage is not about cheating, it is about clarity. It is the advantage of the man who sees the storm coming while others are still admiring the clear blue sky. It is the advantage of the physician who understands the disease, rather than simply praying for the patient's health. This leads us to the very first ruthless rule. Learn the rules that everyone else follows, so that you may know precisely how, when, and where to break them. The moral and social codes that govern society are not divine commandments. They are man-made systems of control. For the masses, they are a cage limiting their actions and thoughts, but for the prince, they are a tool, He understands their power, their purpose, and most importantly, their weaknesses. He knows that appearing to be a devout follower of these rules earns him the trust of the people and the underestimation of his rivals. He builds a facade of conventional virtue, a mask of piety, mercy, and integrity. But behind that mask, he is unbound. He does what is necessary, not what is popular. He understands that to achieve a great end, the stability of the state, the defeat of a dangerous enemy, the consolidation of his own authority, he may have to employ means that the common man would find distasteful. He does not reject morality. He wields it. He is both its master and its most convincing performer. While the idealist is a prisoner of the game, the prince is its architect. This is the great, terrifying chasm that separates the ruler from the ruled, the victor from the victim. It is the willingness to see that the ends, if they are great enough, do indeed justify the means. The preservation of the state, the creation of order from chaos, these are the highest goods, and any action required to secure them is not only permissible, but essential. The idealist perishes because he places his personal virtue above the brutal necessities of survival and dominion. The prince survives and thrives because he understands that the true measure of a leader is not his goodness, but his effectiveness. He knows that in the cold arithmetic of power, it is better to be a successful sinner than a failed saint. For love is a bond of obligation which men, being wretched creatures, break when it serves their purpose, but fear is strengthened by a dread of punishment which is always effective. Comment Rules of Power to accept this truth, and subscribe for the coming lessons in the architecture of the state. To accept the world as it is constitutes the first step. To master it requires the tools of statecraft. The prince who wishes to build an enduring legacy cannot rely on fortune or the goodwill of others. He must become an architect of his own dominion, erecting a structure of authority on unshakable pillars. These are not pillars of stone or steel, but of strategic intellect and calculated force. They are the instruments through which a singular will imposes order upon the chaos of human ambition. The first of these, and perhaps the most vital, is the cultivation of an impenetrable mind, the cunning of the fox. For Machiavelli observed that a ruler must navigate a world filled with snares, and that sheer force is blind to the subtle traps laid by his adversaries. This understanding gives birth to our second ruthless rule: never reveal your true intentions. The common man is a creature of impulse and vanity. He broadcasts his desires, telegraphs his ambitions, and seeks validation for his plans before they are even set in motion. He believes transparency builds trust. The prince knows it builds a cage for himself. To reveal your objective is to give your enemy his most precious assets, time and information. He will know where to build his defenses, where to lay his ambushes, and how to turn your own strategy against you. The master of statecraft, therefore, operates within a perpetual fog. He is a master of misdirection. He will speak passionately of peace while sharpening his swords in the shadows. He will publicly pursue one prize to draw the eyes of his rivals, while his true efforts are directed at a far more valuable target elsewhere. This is the art of the decoy. Let them believe you are obsessed with acquiring a certain territory, or promoting a specific policy, or forming a particular alliance. Let them expend their energy countering this phantom threat. Meanwhile, your real project, the one that truly matters, advances unopposed, nurtured in silence and secrecy. As Machiavelli noted, the prince must be a great feigner and dissembler. He understands that what people believe to be true is a more powerful political reality than the truth itself. This principle extends beyond grand strategy. It is a discipline of daily interaction. You must train your face to be a mask, your words to be a labyrinth. Offer ambiguous statements that can be interpreted in multiple ways. Float contradictory ideas to confuse those who try to study you. Master the art of the sincere lie. When you cloak your intentions in this manner, you force others to react to phantoms. They exhaust their resources, reveal their own allegiances, and expose their anxieties while you remain a calm observer, gathering intelligence from the chaos you have created. This is the ultimate advantage: to act with perfect clarity while your opponents stumble blindly through a world of your own design. This leads to the third rule, an extension of this cunning. Let others do the work for you, but always take the credit. The prince conserves his energy for the moments of critical decision. He does not squander his strength on tasks that can be delegated. He is a conductor, not an instrumentalist. He identifies the talents, ambitions, and weaknesses of those around him and harnesses them for his own purposes. He will assign a difficult, unpopular task to a subordinate, allowing that person to absorb any public anger or resentment. If the subordinate succeeds, the prince takes the ultimate credit, framing the success as a result of his wise leadership. If the subordinate fails, he is easily discarded, a convenient scapegoat to be sacrificed for the sake of public order. In this way, the prince's reputation remains immaculate, while his objectives are achieved through the labor and risk of others. This is not laziness, it is profound efficiency. Every ounce of political capital is a finite resource, and the wise ruler spends it with surgical precision. But cunning alone is insufficient. The fox is brilliant at recognizing traps, but it lacks the strength to frighten away the wolves. There are moments in the exercise of power when subtlety is not only ineffective, but is perceived as weakness. There are threats so direct, so existential, that they cannot be outwitted. They must be annihilated. This is the domain of the lion. The prince, Machiavelli insists, must learn to embody both natures. He must possess the ferocious, overwhelming force of the lion to deal with open rebellion and intransigent foes. This brings us to the fourth and perhaps most brutal of these rules. Crush your enemy completely. This is the principle that idealists find most abhorrent, and it is why they so often fail. The sentimental leader, upon achieving a victory, may be tempted to show mercy. He may believe that a gesture of clemency will win the loyalty of his defeated foe. This is a fatal miscalculation. As Machiavelli warns, men will sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance. A defeated enemy who is left with any power, any influence, or any hope of recovery is not a converted friend. He is a serpent biding its time. He will harbor a grievance, a burning desire for vengeance that will never be extinguished by new favors. He will wait for a moment of your weakness, a political crisis, a foreign war, a downturn in fortune, and he will strike with the venom of a patient assassin. Half measures create future threats. Therefore, when you must strike, your blow must be final. It must be so devastatingly absolute that it erases not only the enemy, but the very possibility of his return. This does not always mean physical annihilation. It can mean the complete dismantling of his power base, the seizure of his wealth, the ruin of his reputation, and the exile of his family. The goal is the political and strategic obliteration of the threat. A surgeon who leaves a fraction of a tumor behind has not saved the patient. He has merely postponed the funeral. The application of this force must be, as Machiavelli described, well-used cruelty, swift, decisive, and applied all at once to secure the state, so that one does not have to persist in it. The shock of its totality establishes a new reality, and the fear it inspires serves as a deterrent to all other would-be challengers. Here we find the synthesis of the fox and the lion, the public performance that makes their private actions possible. The prince's most potent weapon is not his sword or his poison, but his reputation. The masses are unable to grasp the complexities of statecraft. They do not judge a leader by his secret machinations or his necessary cruelties. They judge him by what they see. This brings us to the fifth and final pillar for this lesson: appear to be merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious. Machiavelli states with chilling clarity, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the above-mentioned qualities, but it is very necessary to seem to have them." This is the grand theater of power. Every public appearance is a performance. Every speech, every decree, every charitable donation is a carefully choreographed act designed to shape public perception. The prince may have to break a treaty to save his state, an act of the fox, or execute conspirators to ensure stability, an act of the lion, but in public he must weep for the necessity of such actions. He must speak of his unwavering faith while making deals with heretics. He must publicly pardon a minor offender to cultivate a reputation for mercy, shortly after secretly ordering the complete ruin of a more significant threat. Why? Because the love of the people is fickle, but their belief in your virtue provides a powerful shield. A leader who is perceived as pious and just will find that his actions are given the benefit of the doubt. His harsh measures will be interpreted as reluctant necessities, his deceptions as misunderstood wisdom. The appearance of virtue is an armor that deflects criticism and inspires loyalty. It allows the prince to operate with ruthless pragmatism behind the scenes, secure in the knowledge that the world only sees the mask he has so carefully crafted. He understands that in the realm of governance, perception is reality. He is simultaneously the lion in the council room, the fox in the negotiation, and the saint in the public square. And it is this mastery of duality, this ability to be whatever the moment demands, that forges the unbreakable foundations of his ascendancy. The mastery of external strategy, the cunning of the fox and the ferocity of the lion, is but one half of the equation. These are tools to be wielded in the world of men. But the most formidable fortress a prince must conquer, and the most treacherous territory he must pacify, lies within his own mind. Before he can orchestrate the perceptions of the masses, he must first win the war against himself. This is the inner sanctum of power, a domain where sentiment, conscience, and hesitation are not virtues but existential threats. The first battle is always internal, a struggle against the very instincts that make us human. This gives rise to the sixth and most inwardly demanding rule: dominate your emotions. The average man is a slave to his passions. His decisions are clouded by affection, warped by anger, paralyzed by guilt, and driven by fleeting enthusiasms. These emotional currents make him predictable, manipulable, and ultimately weak. A rival can exploit his love for his family, provoke his pride into a foolish duel, or use his compassion to make him hesitate at a critical moment. For the prince, such internal chaos is a luxury he cannot afford. Power demands a chilling, almost inhuman detachment. It requires the ability to look upon a friend who has become a threat and see only a problem to be solved. It demands the capacity to receive devastating news without flinching, to deliver a ruthless order without a tremor in the voice, and to assess every situation with the cold, dispassionate logic of a mathematician. This is not to say the prince feels nothing. Rather, he has disciplined his feelings to be his servants, not his masters. Anger is not an outburst. It is a calculated performance to intimidate an envoy. Generosity is not a spontaneous act of kindness. It is a strategic investment in future loyalty. Every emotional display is a tool deliberately chosen from his arsenal to achieve a specific effect. This internal dominion is the source of his unnerving calm in the eye of the storm. While others are swept away by the tides of panic and sentiment, he remains an unmovable rock, his judgment unclouded. He has conquered his own nature, and in doing so has made himself immune to the most common forms of human manipulation. This is the first and most profound victory. Once this internal citadel is secured, the prince can turn his attention to the engineering of the public mind. He understands a fundamental truth of governance. A ruler's power is not sustained by his armies alone, but by the consent, or at least the acquiescence, of the governed. He must therefore become an architect of belief, a sculptor of mass psychology. This brings him to the timeless and formidable dilemma: is it better to be loved or to be feared? The idealist invariably chooses love. He believes affection is the strongest bond. Machiavelli, with his characteristic realism, exposed this for the dangerous fallacy it is. His conclusion provides our seventh ruthless rule: it is safer to be feared than loved. His logic is as simple as it is brutal. Love, he reasoned, is a bond of gratitude, a form of obligation. But men, being the self-interested creatures they are, will break this bond the moment it becomes inconvenient. Their loyalty, rooted in affection, is as fickle as their emotions. They will love you when you are providing them with benefits, but they will abandon you the instant a better offer arises, or the moment you demand a genuine sacrifice. Fear, on the other hand, operates on a much more reliable and primal mechanism: the dread of punishment. This dread never fades. It is a constant, quiet presence in the minds of the people. A man might betray a leader he loves for personal gain, but he will think twice before betraying a leader he fears, because the consequences are certain and severe. Love is a request for loyalty. Fear is a demand for obedience. The prince, therefore, does not seek to be cherished like a father. He seeks to be respected like a force of nature. However, this is a path that must be walked with extreme care. Machiavelli is precise in his counsel. A prince must inspire fear, but he must at all costs avoid being hated. Hate is an active, unifying, and explosive emotion. A hated ruler gives his subjects a common cause. Their misery becomes a banner under which they will rally and rebel. Fear, when properly calibrated, is a passive and isolating emotion. It paralyzes opposition. It makes each man afraid to be the first to raise his voice against the regime. The line between inspiring fear and inciting hatred is drawn at two critical points: the property and the women of his subjects. A prince, Machiavelli warns, can execute a man's brother and eventually be forgiven. But if he seizes that man's land or violates his family, the resulting hatred will be eternal. Therefore, the prince's cruelty must always appear just, necessary, and impersonal, a regrettable consequence of state security, not the arbitrary whim of a tyrant. Fear maintains order, hatred breeds revolution. The master of statecraft cultivates the former, while studiously avoiding the latter. This delicate balance is maintained through the theater of cruelty and generosity. The prince's actions must be meticulously staged to reinforce his desired reputation. This leads to the 8th and 9th rules, which govern the distribution of pain and reward. Rule 8. Keep others in a state of dependence upon you. Liberality or generosity is a dangerous virtue if practiced carelessly. A prince who is consistently and lavishly generous will soon exhaust his treasury. To replenish it, he will be forced to tax his people heavily, which will earn him their hatred. Furthermore, a constant stream of benefits creates entitlement, not gratitude. The people will come to see his generosity as their right, and when he can no longer afford it, they will resent him. The wise prince practices generosity with surgical precision. He gives benefits slowly, in small increments, so that they are better savored and create a continual state of hope and dependence. He makes sure that every gift comes directly from his hand, so that the recipient knows precisely to whom he is indebted. He is a miser with his treasury, so that he never has to be rapacious with his people. Conversely, all cruel and unpopular actions must be outsourced. This is the 9th rule. Use a scapegoat for unpopular acts. When a difficult measure is necessary, a new tax, a political purge, the enforcement of a harsh law, the prince does not dirty his own hands. He delegates the task to a subordinate. He allows this minister or general to become the public face of the cruelty, to absorb all the hatred and resentment of the populace. Once the unpleasant but necessary work is done and public anger has reached its peak, the prince makes his move. He steps onto the stage, expresses his own shock and dismay at the subordinate's excesses, and then, in a grand public display of justice, he punishes the very man who was following his orders. The people are satisfied. They see their prince as a just and merciful protector who has saved them from a tyrant. Their loyalty to him is deepened, their fear of his power is reinforced, and the necessary dirty work has been accomplished without staining his own reputation. This is the pinnacle of political theater, to be the author of the crime and simultaneously the hero who avenges it. Through this calculated mastery of human psychology, the prince transforms the very instruments of oppression into pillars of his own popularity, building his throne upon a foundation of expertly managed fear and meticulously curated perception. You have learned to see through the fog of conventional morality and to forge the weapons of the mind. You have grasped the architecture of fear and the theater of perception. Now, before we reveal the final rules that solidify a legacy in stone, ensure you are subscribed, for the ultimate wisdom is reserved for those who dare to execute. The strategies of the fox and the lion, the dominion over one's own mind, and the manipulation of public sentiment. These are all preparatory acts. They are the sharpening of the blade, the drawing of the bow, the meticulous planning before the battle. But plans without action are mere fantasies. There comes a moment when all calculation must cease, and the prince must act. This is the realm of the masterstroke, the decisive blow that reshapes the political landscape. This is where virtu, that uniquely Machiavellian concept of skill, audacity, and strategic prowess, confronts Fortuna, the unpredictable tide of circumstance. The master strategist understands that fortune is a river, sometimes placid, sometimes a raging torrent. He cannot control its flow, but through foresight and preparation, he can build dams and dikes to channel its power for his own purposes. He spends his periods of calm preparing for the inevitable storm. He does not simply wait for an opportunity, he cultivates the conditions for its arrival. When that window of opportunity appears, a rival's sudden weakness, a moment of public panic, a political vacuum, he does not hesitate. He strikes with a speed and decisiveness that leaves his adversaries paralyzed. This fusion of perfect timing and resolute action is the essence of the masterstroke, and it is governed by the 14th ruthless rule, a profound insight into the economy of human memory and emotion. Injuries must be inflicted all at once, while benefits ought to be bestowed little by little. This principle is the blueprint for revolutionary change. The prince who must seize a state or reform an old one understands that he will need to commit acts that are inherently injurious to established interests. He will have to disarm the populace, dismiss old ministers, dismantle powerful factions, and confiscate wealth. A timid ruler would attempt to introduce these harsh measures gradually, hoping to soften their impact. This is a catastrophic error. A slow succession of cruelties keeps the wounds fresh. It creates a perpetual state of anxiety and resentment. Every new day brings a new fear, and the subjects are given ample time to conspire, to organize their resistance, and to hate the ruler who torments them drip by drip. The Machiavellian method is the opposite. It is the way of the surgeon. The cut is deep, swift, and completed in a single brutal operation. All the necessary injuries, the executions, the confiscations, the dismissals, are carried out in one fell swoop at the very beginning of his reign. The shock is immense, the pain is acute, but then it is over. The population is stunned into submission. The new reality is established with terrifying finality. Because the violence is not prolonged, the memory of it begins to fade. People begin to forget the specifics of the terror, remembering only its awesome and conclusive result. Once this necessary, brutal foundation has been laid, the prince immediately changes his approach. He begins to bestow benefits, but not in a flood. He distributes them gradually, one by one. A small tax is repealed. A popular festival is funded. A minor official known for his integrity is promoted. Each small favor, because it is delivered against the recent memory of harshness, appears as a sign of magnificent generosity. Each benefit, tasted individually, is savored more deeply. It keeps the populace in a state of hopeful anticipation for what might come next. They are like a parched man, given water one sip at a time. Each drop is a treasure. By this method, the prince erases the memory of his initial cruelty with a slow, steady application of calculated kindness. He secures his state through a single, unforgettable act of violence and then maintains it through a carefully managed and perpetual drip of favor. He is both the storm that clears the forest and the gentle sun that allows new growth to begin. Yet, the masterstroke, however brilliant, is still only a single event. It creates a vacuum, but it does not automatically guarantee what will fill it. The true test of a ruler is not in the seizure of power, but in its consolidation. Victory is fleeting. Dominion is an architectural project. This brings us to the 15th and final rule, the principle that separates a mere conqueror from a founder of states. Destroy the old foundations and build new ones in your own name. A prince who takes over a new territory and attempts to rule through its old laws, old customs, and old allegiances is a fool sitting on a throne of straw. The old structures are loyal to the old regime. The established noble families will always see him as a usurper. The existing institutions will forever be a potential source of rebellion, a rallying point for those who resent the new order. Therefore, the true master of statecraft is not a preserver. He is a creator. He must have the courage to become what Machiavelli called a new prince, a founder of a new order. He must systematically dismantle the sources of the old power. He may need to relocate the entire population of a troublesome city, breaking their ancestral ties to the land and to each other. He must extinguish the bloodlines of the former ruling family so that no legitimate claimant can ever arise to challenge him. He must create a new nobility, men who owe their wealth and status entirely to him and who therefore have a vested interest in the survival of his regime. He must establish new laws that reflect his authority and new institutions that make his power indispensable to the functioning of the society. He must build his own city in his own image. This process is profoundly disruptive and requires an iron will, but it is the only way to transform a temporary military victory into a permanent political reality. He is not merely occupying the house of his predecessor, he is demolishing it down to the bedrock and constructing a fortress in its place, a fortress whose every stone is loyal to him alone. This is the ultimate expression of the Machiavellian ethos. The ruthless rules are not a pathway to mere tyranny, they are a guide to permanence. The supreme power is not about being good or evil, for these are subjective terms defined by the victors. It is about being effective. It is about possessing the clarity to see the world as a chaotic and dangerous arena, and having the audacity to impose a lasting order upon it. The final goal is not simply to win the game, but to build a new board on which only you can triumph. It is the construction of a state, a position, a legacy, a structure of authority that is so deeply rooted, so intelligently designed, that it can withstand the corrosive forces of time and the violent whims of fortune. It is the forging of a throne that endures long after the man who built it has turned to dust.